and welcome back to my channel. Today's video I'm going to be talking about Alamo City Comic Con and my experience attending the convention. So, yeah, I'll just jump right into it. So my first experience at a Comic Con was actually one called South Texas Comic Con. So this was only the second Comic Con I've attended, so I don't have too much to compare it to, but I'm just going to talk about my general experience at the convention. So the convention did take place the weekend before Halloween, which was the 26th, 27th, and 28th of October. I did have a 3-day pass, and I was supposed to go for all 3 days. However, because I do not live in San Antonio, which is where the convention was being held, I didn't get in on time on Friday to go to the convention because they did end a little early on Friday. So I didn't get to go on Friday, but I did go on Saturday and Sunday. Originally this video was going to be more of like a vlog type video, but that didn't really happen. I did take pictures and little clips, but I didn't talk that much, and I didn't do enough to make it like an actual vlog without having to explain more. So I decided instead I would explain everything. So I'll insert right here my little intros I did for my vlog for day 1 and day 2. Hey, and welcome back to my channel. I am at Alamo City Comic Con, and I'm going to be vlogging all day. I'm already in my first cosplay, which is Miss Marvel. I got my mask here, and I'm going to be vlogging all day, so yeah. So I never really posted like an intro to day 2 today, but yeah, it's day 2, already the end, gonna leave soon. And yeah, so now I'll just talk about the experiences. I'm going to talk about the panels, the vendors, and then just general things after that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the panels. So on Saturday, we did go to 3 panels. The first panel was, we went to the Jeff Goldblum panel, we went to the E.T. panel, and we went to the Sesame Street panel. So let me talk a little bit about each panel. So the Jeff Goldblum panel was the first panel. It was in the main panel room, which is called Panel Room A. There was A, B, and C. I didn't attend any panels in Room C, but I did go to ones in Room A and B. So Panel Room A is where they had the Jeff Goldblum panel. It was actually really cool. So before the panel actually starts, when we're just waiting and they're sitting, they have screens, and they're kind of just showing like clips from some of his previous movies and whatnot. And then the seating was actually pretty good every single time, whether it was Panel Room A or B. Despite not being VIP, there was still pretty decent seats. So that was something I think is worth noting and mentioning. Great on their part. So I think that was the probably most packed panel of the whole convention, at least of the ones that I attended. And it was a really interesting panel. Of course, you know, just getting to hear more about Jeff Goldblum. He did mention he's coming out with more music. He has a band that he's been performing with, and so that was really interesting, something I didn't really know. I know him as more of an actor, so to hear that about his music was pretty interesting. And then he did talk about his experience in Thor Ragnarok, which was one of my favorite roles of his, the Grand Master in Thor Ragnarok. He talked about that experience working with the director Taika Waititi, who is a famous, who became more popular after doing Thor Ragnarok. He talked about his experience with Marvel and Kevin Feige and all that sort of stuff. So that was really interesting. Then the other panels we went to, the second one was the Sesame Street panel.
Tonight, I have never been so happy, so overjoyed, so out of my mind excited to be on stage with heroes of mine than I am to be starting directly to my left. The Kermit the Frog I grew up on, Mr. Steve Whitmire. And then various other things which we'll talk about. To his left, I don't know how to properly introduce a man who has meant so much to now generations of childhoods in the United States and across the world.
I think that's how you do it.
Look, from Steve Whitmire's mouth, that's the best praise I could get. Let's hear it for Oscar the Grouch, Big Bird. And to his left, the real celebrity in the room. Her Majesty herself, Deb Spinney. Let's hear it for Deb.
So they had the voice of the current voice of Kermit the Frog, who took over after Jim Henson, and they also had the voice of Oscar the Grouch and Big Bird, who is the same person. He plays both voices, and he actually just retired. If you haven't seen that, Carol is his name. He just retired. So, yeah, that was actually last Thursday. So anyway, it was really interesting to hear about what it's like, not just doing these voices, but it was really interesting to hear about the experience, 1, taking over for Jim Henson, 2, knowing Jim Henson, and 3, as a puppeteer. I think that's so different from any other voice acting and from just any acting in general, because you're not just acting, you're controlling these puppets. And I think that was a really interesting panel, in my opinion. I loved Sesame Street growing up, and I really was interested in learning more about the process of being a puppeteer and doing the voice. And there was actually about 2 I don't want to say amateur, but I'm going to say amateur puppeteers in the audience. They had their puppets with them. It was really cool to see them get to ask questions and learn more about something that they were interested in. And then they also talked about, so I've seen Sesame Street in Spanish before, which is called Plaza Sésamo. In that Sesame Street in Spanish, which is, I guess, all of Latin America is where it appears, they do not have Big Bird. They have another bird character. It's a big bird also, but it's more green, and it's not called Big Bird. So they were talking about how apparently, and I think it's over 100 countries that Sesame Street is played in, they do not have Big Bird in any other country except the U.S. and China. And the reason for that is that originally no other country was supposed to have a Big Bird, but when they went to China many years ago, wanting to do Sesame Street, their condition was that yes, they would do it, but only if they could have Big Bird, because they loved Big Bird over there. So that's why they're the only other country with a Big Bird. So I thought that was really interesting. And then the third and that was in panel room B. And then in the same panel room was the E.T. panel.
C. Thomas Howell, can we get you on the stage? He says, I'll let the kids go over here. Next up, Robert McNaughton. We brought one of the kids up. Let's bring Henry Thomas up to the stage. And last but certainly not least, someone that I think the phrase "a distinct honor and pleasure" was designed to welcome to the stage, Dee Wallace. She's shaking her head. She's shaking her head no.
So I have seen E.T. I'm not a huge fan. I haven't seen it in many, many years, but it was something that interested my mom, so we went to that. And it was actually a pretty interesting panel. We got to learn about, so similar to kind of like the Sesame Street, learning about the puppeteer aspect of it all, we were learning about how in this era, before there was CGI is computer-generated images, for anyone who doesn't know, which they use in most of these movies nowadays, superhero movies, alien movies, any movies that have like fantasy aspects or just something you can't really do live. So they were kind of telling us how they did E.T. without CGI, and I thought that was really interesting. Personally, I'm always really interested in the behind the scenes of movies, like the Marvel movies. If you see kind of pre-CGI, the process, it's really interesting. And I thought the same thing was interesting with E.T., knowing that they didn't have CGI and how they kind of were able to do what they did, and I think it was really similar to puppeteering, so it kind of tied into the Sesame Street panel. So all 3 panels were really great, and then on the second day, we did four more panels. We did, the first one was in panel room B, it was the Cobra Kai panel. In panel room A, we did the John Cusack panel. Panel room B, we did the Jodi Benson panel, and then panel room A, we did the Steve Wagner panel. So the Cobra Kai panel was another one we kind of did for my mom.
Hey everybody. Sorry to be late. They didn't tell us we were supposed to be here until just now.
No, you guys are working late.
She was interested in it, but I thought it was kind of cool hearing, about the process of revisiting characters many years later and kind of how reboots come about and whatnot. So that was pretty interesting to me. And then the John Cusack panel was also kind of for my mom.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Thank you for coming to San Antonio. Pleasure to have you here.
But it was also, all the panels were interesting just to see even what the fans were asking their questions. It was just interesting to see what they wanted to know. So then the panels that we went to that I wanted to see were the Jodi Benson panel and the Scott Wagner panel. So Jodi Benson, for those who don't know, she is the voice of the Little Mermaid, and then she also has done several other acting roles with Disney. She was Thumbelina and just a ton of other roles. It was really a great panel. So I will mention this. On the conventions part, there was a little bit of disorganization. Originally, the schedule said she would be in panel room A. We're in panel room A, we have great seats, we're waiting for her. Then they're like, sorry, she's just been switched to panel room B. We head to panel room B, we're in panel room B. They say, oh no, she's actually going to be in panel room A, let's escort you all back there. They escort us all back there. A lot of us are there to see Jodi Benson. I don't really know who was going to be in that room at the time, but it was not Jodi Benson. So then we figure that out, and we actually have to go back to panel room B and get there late for her panel. So it was a lot of confusion on the convention's part because they changed the room, then they said they didn't. So that was just one of the things that was a little unorganized. But nonetheless, it ended up working out. We got there. I even got to ask her a question. I got to ask her about her experience working on Wreck-It Ralph because as many of you probably know, there is a scene where all the original voices of the Disney princesses appear in the movie. So I asked her about that, and I actually thought she got to work with the other. So in my head, here's what I thought happened. Let's say, there's 5 characters in a scene. I thought all 5 of those voice actors were in a room and they recorded the scene together. It turns out that's not actually the case. They work individually. So I asked her about her experience working with Ali Carvalho, who plays Moana's voice, and some of the other newer Disney princesses. But she explained to me that they actually don't record together. They were all separate. But I really liked that she got to tell me that and kind of talked about her experience with Wreck-It Ralph. So that was really interesting. And then she surprised us all at the end, and she sang Part of Your World from The Little Mermaid. It was beautiful, and honestly, her voice has not changed from the movie, and I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of the convention. I love Disney. I have a whole Spotify playlist of Disney music, and Part of Your World is one of my favorite Disney songs, and so to hear that live and to just hear her voice was amazing.
Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete? Wouldn't you think of the girl who has everything? Look at this trove, treasures untold. How many wonders can one cavern hold? Looking around here, you think, sure, she's got everything. one thingamabobs, I get 20. But who cares? No big deal. I want more. I wanna be where the people are. I wanna see them dancing, walking around on those, what do you call them? Oh, feet. Flipping your fins, you don't get too far. Legs are required for jumping, dancing, strolling along. What's that word again? Street. Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun, wandering free. Wish I could be part of that world. What would I give if I could live out of these waters? What would I pay to spend a day warm on the sand? Bet you on land they understand, bet they don't reprimand their daughters, pregnant women, sick as swimming, ready to stand, and ready to know what the people know. Ask my questions and get some answers. What's a fire and why is it? What's the word? Burn. When's it my turn? When I love to explore the shore above, out of the sea. Wish I could be part of that world. Thank you guys so much. God bless you.
And then the other panel we went to was in panel room A, and it was Scott Wagner, who played the voice of Aladdin, and who also played Steve on both Full House and Fuller House.
He was in Full House, the voice of none other than Aladdin, and that was actually in everything. So, film, TV, animated series. Please give it up and give him a very warm welcome. Here's Mr. Scott Wagner. Nice to see you. It's very nice to meet you.
It's good to be here.
So it was really interesting. I'm a big fan. My favorite Disney princess is Jasmine, and I just saw Aladdin on Broadway. So it was kind of cool to hear about his experience with that. He talked about his audition, and that how when he sent in his tape, his mom played the voice of the genie, and that they actually were pretty interested in his mom more than him at first, but obviously he ended up getting the part. And then what I really was interested in is Full House and Fuller House. So obviously I was not alive when Full House was coming out, but I have seen every episode. I still watch it if it's on TV. And then Fuller House I have been watching a lot. So he got to talk a little bit about the next season of Fuller House, about what it's like working with Netflix on a Netflix show, what it's like acting after he didn't think he would be acting again. I believe he's been like writing shows and stuff. And so he talked about all of that. And yeah, so that was a pretty cool panel. Now, I'm also going to mention, so there was this disorganization with the Jodie Benson panel and where she was going to be and whatnot. Then I was supposed to, I went to the Linda Larkin panel, and she's the voice of Princess Jasmine. Then, unfortunately, and I know this is something that neither her nor the convention could control, she had a death in her family. She had to leave, so her panel got canceled. That was disappointing. And the other thing that was a little disappointing is the Cole Sprouse panel, or not just the panel, but in general, his appearance was canceled due to filming and stuff. It was before the convention even started, but I think it was like 2 days before they emailed me. They gave me a refund because I was going to do the photo op with him. So that was also a little disorganized and a little disappointing on the convention's part, but again, both are understandable, filming and scheduling and, inevitable things like a death in a family are things that can't be controlled. But again, just something worth noting. And then it was really cool. The other Comic Con that I went to, they kind of had like the signings and the photo ops. Well, the photo ops were still done like in private, but the signings were kind of done in private at the other convention. In this one, they were not, so you could walk by and you could see a lot of the celebrities. I did manage to get secret pictures of both the voice of Pocahontas and the original Hulk, Lou Ferrigno. I just, secretly got pictures of them. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and insert all the pictures, clips, and everything from the panels, as well as those pictures that I secretly took. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the vendors.